Hello, everybody. My name's Nicola James. I'm the founder of Lexxic, and I am a chartered occupational psychologist with a specialism in neuropsychology. So when I set my company up, it was just me, like going around and just trying to do just trying to do my thing to try and help people in neurodiversity and follow my heart. And when I first started my company, I was only 27, and I always thought I'm dyslexic, and I always felt like I wasn't good enough. So very early on in the days of Lexxic, I tended to recruit people who were the opposite of me, because that sort of empowered me in my strengths, because they could pick up things which maybe I found more difficult, like, for example, looking at the detail, or they could proofread some of my reports. And in the early days, my mum would proofread some of my reports. So, this sort of carried on. And then you sort of start to realize, so I would come out with about 100 ideas a minute, and everyone would look at me, and I was like, I never really understood that they didn't interpret them as ideas. They interpreted them as every single thing that they had to do. So can you imagine someone sitting there going, oh my God, I have to do all these things. I'm just throwing out ideas, sort of reflecting externally. And then sometimes I would go right up into the clouds. And sometimes I found people who could go into the detail couldn't come up into the clouds. And I was like, hang on a minute. I've got all these great people who are really good people management. They're really good at their sort of job. But I'm struggling with not having the agility to sort of think bigger picture and think like me. Then I started to go, hang on a minute. So I always used to compare myself to my brother, and he was an A-grade student, classic academic. And I always used to think he was bright and I wasn't. And then I started to realize that actually I could think differently, and I could go at paces that a lot of people couldn't on certain things, like ideas and seeing ahead and seeing where a business needed to go and sort of feeling out through instinct what I needed to do to respond quickly. But I couldn't go into the level of detail these people were going into. So then I started to realize, hang on a minute, we need both. We need the agility of being able to think, bigger picture and creatively and make fast decisions and not think in a linear way. But we also need people who think in a linear way that can look at the detail and the method and the process. So then I started to build a different relationship with myself. So rather than saying I feel not as clever as everybody else, I feel dumb, I feel stupid, I need to prove myself, I started to go, oh, I understand why I've got the grades I've got. I understand why I'm doing so well. It's my ability to critically think. It's my ability to reason. But at school, that wasn't marked as a grade A. That wasn't marked as a grade B. It was very much writing essays, linear thinking, and something I really struggled with. Very often in debates, I'd get really high grades. I could write the same essay on the same debate. I could get a first on my debate, and I actually failed an essay because I knew too much on the subject. So I got really confused with how to order this essay. And I remember going in to see this lecturer and going, you say in my essay, I don't know anything on the subject, but you've graded me on a presentation that I gave on the same subject and gave me a first. And then I told her what I knew. So the point I'm trying to get to is, in business, if you recruit one type of person, you get one type of brain. Therefore, everyone might agree with each other, and then because they're taking on the same approach, but that doesn't allow you to innovate and evolve. And we need lots of different types of brains and lots of different types of people to support creativity and moving forward. So if you take Lexxic, we really like bringing on different types of brains, and it just allows us to be much more malleable. So the person designing the training and coming up with all the ideas going at 100 miles an hour won't be the accountant, perhaps, but the person that's working, doing the people management and doing all the detail and all the technical checking might not be having all the 100 ideas, but together it works really well. And that's why neurodiversity is so important in business. What happened in some of these sort of early business days of selection and assessment is they wanted this sort of profile of an all-round person with all these skills. So they selected all these types of people. But what they hadn't factored in is what they're doing is selecting people that are quite similar. So what you can find in neurodiversity, not all the time, but this is sort of a personal experience. Sometimes people can be very good at certain things, but they might not be an all-rounder. But if you don't have that person that's really good at certain things, sometimes your business can't respond in the way you need to respond. So you can see sort of some of the changes in some of the recruitment processes in the larger companies, because they're starting to realize they don't want everyone to tick the box. They don't want everyone to be good at everything. They need to have people that think differently in order to respond fast enough to an ever-changing environment. And if you don't do that, you don't have the agility in brains, because if you don't get difference in thought, if you don't get difference in thinking, you do not learn to progress, because you all agree, and therefore you don't get the challenges. You know, it's a bit like Elon Musk. He throws loads of people together in a melting pot, has lots of different skills, and they might not know how to do it, the individual, but all together they create something new that has never been done before. And that's why it's so important to select beyond a certain type, because then you get the creativity, then you get the agility, then you can move faster, and that just blows performance out the water. Because in order to perform, you need conflict, you need different ways of thinking. So how does that impact neurodiversity? Neurodiversity is a very broad term. It covers a lot of different conditions, and people in those conditions will have a large range of different strengths and different profiles. So, you know, I'm dyslexic, but I'm quite auditory. I'm not a creative artist, but just, you know, a lot of people who are artistic can be creative. So, you know, it's actually really important to look beyond this label, and it's important to look at what is somebody good at. So rather than saying, you know, I don't want this, you say you should be recruiting for the role. So what can sometimes happen is people use lots of a selection and assessment process, and actually it's actually designing out what you need in that role. If you want somebody who thinks quickly, if you want someone creative, and you assess them on all these detailed tasks, you're probably going to lose that brain type. So, you know, in the stuff that we're doing at Lexxic, like neurodiversity smart, which is looking at things like accreditations for organizations, we're teaching people to have selection processes that are actually recruiting for the skills that they need in the role. And equally, if someone is neurodiverse, we sort of get them to think about, rather than what type of job do you apply for, it's what are you good at and what skills do you want in a job? And then you're aligning yourself to the role rather than sort of looking at the job type. Because sometimes people with neurodiverse might not understand their strengths, particularly if they've been through an academic system that doesn't really show them what they're good at. So in this world with technology, there's way more emphasis on being creative, thinking outside the box. You know, you've got lots of recruitment schemes coming through from these tech companies, and they're like, we want neurodiverse employees because we want people that think differently, or we want people that are really good at looking at patterns and trends, but they don't have to necessarily be good people managers. And sometimes you can get people that want somebody to be able to do everything. And sort of running Lexxic, we recognise that now. We used to want people to be able to do everything, but actually you might get someone who's a really good coach. And so it's about ensuring you support and develop flexibility in the career so people can have different paths, because someone that's really good technically might not be a really good coach, or somebody that's really good at managing people might not necessarily be someone that wants to, you know, look at finance, for example. And that's why it's important in development systems to have agility. So if you have agility in your career development process, if you make sure you are selecting the job rather than just using generic selection and assessment tests, which can design out the candidate you're actually looking for, then you're going to start attracting in the talent. Therefore, you're going to get the right fit for the role. Therefore, you're going to get the diversity in brain. And all of that inclusion and diversity means your business performance will just strive, because the more difference in thinking, the more challenging, the more diversity of thought, the larger the ability to adapt. Unfortunately, very often children are externalized their value based upon their grade. And the grading system and the educational system is very linear in a lot of cases. So what that means is, unfortunately, somebody might come with a very neurodiverse brain who's very talented, but because they've been through this stunted system of, you know, your value is your grade, they might go, oh, I'm not good enough, I'm not confident. And they learn to externalize their value on their grade, because that's what school teaches them. We must get A's, we must get A's. And so it's really important we look at the schooling system as well, because it's outdated. It doesn't provide us with this depth and agility to recognize all the different minds that we have and allow people to be strong in different areas. So, you know, that's something that's really important to address. And you know, when we talk to people who've got kids with neurodiversity and they go, there's such pressure to get into schools and such pressure to get grades, you know, I always say, try and focus on what the child is good at, because when you focus on what the person is good at, they might need coaching on development on certain areas. But if they see they're good at something, they'll develop that skill, they'll develop what aligns with their soul, their heart. And then what happens is they will have that self-confidence. So they will make their way in the world and they will find something that aligns with what they're good at. That could be, you know, gardening. That could be, you know, being in sales. It could be a wide range of things. But the fundamental skill to ingrain in the child is self-confidence and self-belief. Because if somebody learns that they're not good enough as a child, they'll start viewing the world as against them rather than for them. And they'll start seeing the world as something which is they're battling with, because they're not fitting their brain into this, you know, round hole that they think they're meant to fit into. Whereas if they start to explore, you know, what am I good at? Where do I fit? Where are my strengths? Where can I bloom? Where can I excel? And they have that self-belief, they will find their path because they'll attract it, and they'll be making decisions based upon what they know about themselves. So when you bring that into the workplace, that's why coaching is important. You know, it's not trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. It's trying to get the best out of somebody. And you might have somebody that comes in and you might go, actually, they're not good at that, but they're really good at that. So if you develop them and have a talent path where they're really good at that, you'll get people coming through and you'll get, you know, much more out of that person. And also, you know, I've worked in companies where you have somebody who might be in a shop floor in their really practical role, and they go, they're doing really well, and they go into a management role. It's very paper-based. So they've gone from a very practical role to a paper-based role. Suddenly their performance drops off the cliff. But actually the role above, which might be more sort of agile and more about sort of managing people again, like an MD or a more leadership management role, would be where they're good at. So I think we have to get rid of this linear career path, because somebody who's very good at detail and paperwork might not be so good at the agility with people. And so sometimes what happens is, you know, people have things like technical routes and non-technical routes, but it's really important to have the agility and flexibility in the career to develop somebody. And regardless of being neurodiverse, it's really important to have migrations of all different types of brains. Because the more you have that, the more you can proactively think, the more you can respond to different types of challenges and think about innovative solutions, which then impacts upon the bottom line, which then impacts upon business performance, impacts upon creativity, and then the cycle goes round. Very often with unconscious bias, people can recruit people like themselves. So everyone agrees and everyone's harmonious and it's all lovely, but that doesn't then relate to challenge. That relates to people agreeing with you because you're similar to them. And you know, you won't get the diversity of thought because you've got similar types of personality types. And therefore you can sometimes stagnate, because when you need to respond to different types of challenges that come into business, so you need different brain types on different types of challenges. That's why it's so important to have that diversity of solution. And then, you know, in Lexxic, we have a variety of people. It's, you know, some people are neurodiverse, some people aren't neurodiverse, but you do find that within a team, by blending lots of different types of skills and talents and people types, you just get way more out because you are bringing in lots of different ideas and experiences. So where am I at? What are my sort of final key messages? I think my final key messages are that people can have an assumption on what neurodiversity is. People can be scared of recruiting somebody that is neurodiverse. People on the neurodiverse spectrums of different conditions are, it's a very broad category of person with lots of different talents, challenges, with a wide range of people who don't know that they're neurodiverse. So it's important to really promote the individual, have attraction strategies to attract the neurodiverse brain, because it comes with so many assets and it comes with so many skills, and it's really important to recruit the right person for the job. And we see organisations wanting to do more and more of that now. So we've got organisations really proactively looking at recruitment and attraction strategies, because they're finding that in the neurodiverse talent pool, that is where they're finding the type of person they're looking for that role. We've got, it's becoming more like mental health in terms of awareness around it. So there's much more support around providing adjustments, around providing diagnosis, around providing sort of workplace assessments. And it is just adding so much value to the organisation, to the extent where you have lots of recruitment companies coming up with neurodiverse recruitment. And we just get more and more organisations realising that what people thought neurodiversity was, it's not. And people realising that you've got such a pool of creativity, talents, potential that people are realising they're starting to tap into. A lot of people will have heard this before, but the amount of entrepreneurs that who are neurodiverse is phenomenal. And if you think about that brain type, it's about ability to think ahead, ability to create outside the box. And when somebody goes through challenges or trauma in childhood, they learn skills very early on to adapt, to be resilient, to go around the problem. And when you bring that type of profile into a workplace with somebody who's had to be more resilient in a system that might not support their learning style, you just get people that can adapt, people that can think out the box, people that are resilient, people that can respond to the ever-changing working environment. And that is worth its weight in gold.